Thanks for coming today. My name is Tony Sutton, I'm State Chair of the Republican Party, and I'm announcing that we're today launching a radio campaign to talk about Mark Ritchie and his record as Secretary of State. Because we think that today is the beginning of a campaign to have a new Secretary of State in Minnesota. Well, actually, to kick things up, why don't we play the ad first and then we'll talk.
Secretaries of State from around the U.S. are meeting in Minnesota, but Minnesota's Secretary of State Mark Ritchie is no model of a fair and open election official. Ritchie lied about using state resources for political purposes. He helped create the recount mess by not properly training election officials. And under pressure from members of his own party, Ritchie switched positions on which ballots to count. Mark Ritchie, too partisan for Minnesota. Visit RitchieFacts.com to learn more. Prepared and paid for by the Republican Party of Minnesota. This is an independent expenditure not approved by any candidate, nor is any candidate responsible for it.
As he had mentioned, we want to take advantage of the fact that the Secretary of State's are meeting to highlight that they should not be looking to Mark Ritchie to be a subject matter expert or a model for what a fair and open election official should be. And that's why we're kicking off this ad campaign, because we believe Minnesota needs a new Secretary of State, somebody who's going to be less partisan and someone who's going to be above politics in administering elections in the state. And so what the ad outlines, quite frankly, there are three areas that we're going to start with in our efforts to unseat Secretary of State Ritchie. We believe that citizens of the state need to be reminded of the fact that he used state resources for political purposes as part of his campaign. And you might remember that he ran on a platform that he was going to depoliticize the office, and instead did the complete opposite. Secondly, we believe that his statutory responsibility is to make sure that election officials are properly trained. And part of the confusion and mess about the recount is that it was pretty obvious that local election officials were not thoroughly trained in the processes, for example, on absentee ballots and the handling of absentee ballots, and that the fact that the absentee ballots were handled differently in different parts of the state is an indication that the ball was dropped on training. And finally, most egregiously, we think that the Secretary of State succumbed to political pressure from members of his own party to obtain the result that was desired. And we have a visual aid here that talks about what we think is the most egregious example. This is record of the rejected absentee ballots. Our intention here is not to rehash the recount campaign or to relive that battle, but our intention here is to make the case and show why we think it's time for a new Secretary of State in Minnesota. Michael?
Well, in particular, I think this is the start of a campaign. This is the start of a process that's going to take 16 months. And today's the first day, I think, of that, where we're going to start discussing, the party's going to start discussing in a very direct way Secretary of State Ritchie's record. In particular, one thing I want to bring note to and explain again is the situation with him using state resources. The Secretary of State Ritchie ran on a platform of depoliticizing the office. And within a year of being elected office, he was caught using his state office to fund his political campaign. And then when asked about it, lied about it. And that is, I think, a clear example of the partisanship that exists from Secretary of State Ritchie and the level of trust that he has earned over the last few years since he's been in office. He has really exceeded every available expectation that Republicans had on how partisan and unfair and dishonest an elected official can be.